Mark's going to go home directly after you.
Good evening. I declare the opening of the Council Members' Briefing session at 6 p.m. Good evening, councillors, staff, ladies and gentlemen. This meeting today is being held on Whadjuk Noongar Budja, and I would like to acknowledge and pay my respects to elders past, present and future. I thank all past and present members of the community that have supported the city to better understand and value Noongar culture within the city of Wanneroo. Please note that the audio-visual proceedings of tonight's meeting will be live broadcast online with the exception of matters discussed behind closed doors. The broadcast of the proceedings of the meeting can be accessed live and on demand through the City of Wanneroo YouTube channel. Item 1 is attendances, and they are as per the record. We also have an apology from Councillor Berry, Councillor Bedworth and Councillor Newen. And tonight we have a request for electronic attendance from Councillor Huntley, and I'll ask my fellow council members to vote on accepting Councillor Huntley into the meeting electronically. How many councillors have we got here tonight? So that's 6, 11, and that was passed unanimously. So let the record show that Councillor Huntley has been authorised by Council to attend this briefing session by electronic means in accordance with the details as signed in the request documentation submitted on the request form dated the 21st of May 2024. Councillor Huntley, could you please make your declaration coming into the meeting? This declaration is to be read in accordance with section 14 CA 5(1). There you go, Jacqueline.
Thank you. In accordance with section 14C A5, I, Jacqueline Huntley, declare that I can maintain confidentiality while attending the council meeting electronically.
Thank you, Councillor Huntley. And as I said, apologies and leave of absence, as has been recently stated. Item 3, deputations. Rules of the deputation to be read aloud by myself. 1. Deputations are to be presented during the briefing session at item 3 in the order of business. 2. Deputations must relate to a report on the current briefing session agenda. 3. A deputation is not to exceed 3 speakers in number, and only those speakers may address the council members. 4. Speakers of a deputation will collectively have a maximum of up to 10 minutes, dependent on the number of deputations received, to address the council members, unless an extension of time is granted. 5. A deputation is to be in the form of a statement and no debate or discussion on the matter is to occur. 6. Questions from council members relating to the subject matter should be reserved until the administration has presented on the relevant report during the meeting. However, a point of clarification by a council member on a specific statement may be permitted. 7. There is an opportunity for public question time for members of the public at item 7 in the order of business. So the only deputation I have been confirmed of receiving this evening is from Joanne Farrell and Renee Munier. You're here today. Would you like to come to the podium and give us your name and the suburb you live in and read out your deputation for us? Thank you.
To do as yet. Oh, there you go. So do I just read what our concerns are in respect to
yes, please.
Here. So basically we have at the end of our street, it's not really a cul-de-sac, it's a dead end. And we have visitors in the street that park there. I'm at number 20 and Renee's at number 15. So we're basically right at the end of the street. So when they park there, regardless of whether they're facing the flow of traffic or not, if they're on Renee's side, they sort of almost obstruct his driveway to the point he has to veer out and then around. And if they park on my side, they're exactly opposite his driveway, and it's difficult for me to reverse out because that's our only reversing circle in the whole street. Everyone else has two ways. We've only got one way out. So we're asking whether a no parking or a keep clear road signage be put there so that no one can park there.
Thank you. Is there anything else you want to state in your deputation?
Renee has a few questions.
So the biggest thing for me is, so when they park there, it overhangs my driveway. I've called the ranger out. Apparently there's not much they can do. Biggest thing for me is when I reverse out for him, if I'm not paying attention for that split second, I'm going to hit their car and then I'm probably liable for the damage, even though, you know, they're covering my driveway. And also they park there. I've left some courteous notes on their windscreen before they park. I work shift work, so they constantly park at the front there and just have arguments. It's normally number 13. They have arguments to and fro from right in front of my bedroom window to their place of residence. I've put signs on my window saying I'm a shift worker, can you please be quiet? Doesn't seem to be working, so.
And they have big V8 cars that, they're rather noisy, so they rattle the windows, and if he's asleep, it just bothers him, obviously, as you would if someone was to bother you middle of the night, I suppose.
Thank you. Unless you have anything further to say, we will be asking questions about this item fairly shortly if you'd like to wait in the chamber. Thank you.
Okay,
Councillor Miles?
Yeah, just a question for you. Are the people that are parking in that end of the road, are they within the residents of the area, or are they parking there because of the school?
They're residents of the area. They've chosen to basically hoard their garage, so they don't park in their garage, they park in their driveway. They've got many visitors, so even when their driveway is free, they just park where they park at the end of the street, even though they could park in the driveway. So it's really blatant inconsideration.
Thank you. We'll now go to item 4, which is reports. There's no announcements by the Mayor anyway. Planning and sustainability. Item 4.1 has been withdrawn and has been moved to the August Ordinary Council meeting. Item 4.5, I think we'll just bring that forward. 4.5, which is strategic asset management. That's the request for parking prohibition at Gisellas Road, Hocking. Thank you, Mr Singh. Sorry, I'm just changing the order so the people here can get home before it's too cold or too wet. So, and we'll just speak to item 4.5 and then go back to planning. Mr Singh, thank you. If you could speak to that, if you have anything to speak to item 4.5, please.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. I don't intend to present that item. It's pretty straightforward, as deputation has, presenters have outlined. The issue is there. We assessed as per the Road Traffic Act, and where the parking prohibitions are normally applied are where there's a traffic congestion. So we didn't see in this particular case. That's why we recommended no parking prohibitions.
Okay, councillors, do you have any questions? Yes, Councillor Wright.
Thank you, Mayor. I've got 7 questions on this item. Please feel free to stop me when you've tired of my voice. So just in regards to the first one, the report states that the installation of signs for parking prohibitions and the ongoing cost of maintenance are funded through the annual operating budget. Could the council be provided with a breakdown of these costs to assess the financial implications of installing signs in this and in future cases?
Mr Singh?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. If we look at just the petition request, that probably will require, if council does agree with the recommendation or not, doesn't agree with the recommendation, if there will be need for about 3 signs, that will be a cost of about $300.
Councillor Wright.
Thank you. My second question, the report mentions that the parking prohibitions are not supported to address residential parking matters. However, the city's parking local law prohibits parking that causes an obstruction. Given that the petition describes parking that could be considered an obstruction, why is the installation of parking prohibition signs not supported in this case, especially in a cul-de-sac/dead-end road?
Mr Singh.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. As the report comment mentions that parking prohibitions are generally considered when there is a traffic congestion, and we didn't see in this particular instance.
Councillor Wright.
Thank you, Mayor. In the report states that a vehicle parked parallel to the curb at the end of, I always get this wrong, Chasselas Road, and facing the correct direction is not considered to be obstructing driveway access. However, Regulation 166 of the Road Traffic Code 2000 prohibits stopping a vehicle in a way that obstructs access to a path or driveway. Given the concerns raised in the petition about obstructed driveways, could administration clarify how the parked vehicle's compliance with the Road Traffic Code 2000 was assessed in this case?
Mr Singh.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. As I outlined in the report, if a vehicle is parked next to the curb in the traffic direction, it is parked legally on the particular stretch of the road.
Are there any other councillors that want to ask a question? Because Councillor Wright's had 3 questions. If anyone else wants to jump in, if I'm not, I'll go back to Councillor Wright. Councillor Wright.
Thank you. Thank you, councillors. Just in regards to my next question, the report mentions that the local area traffic management policy does not consider this road for assessment due to its current length. However, Regulation 108 of the Road Traffic Code 2000 prohibits obstructing the path of another driver or pedestrian. Could administration explain how the potential obstruction of traffic flow due to parked vehicles at the end of this cul-de-sac/dead-end road aligns with this regulation?
Mr Singh.
Sorry, Mayor, I need to clarify through Councillor Wright. I think you're mentioning the local area traffic management policy or the Road Traffic Act?
In the report, it mentions specifically the management policy for the assessment of this particular road.
Thank you, Mayor. That comment in the report reflects that there is a general perception that traffic treatments can be installed in any street to manage traffic or provide traffic safety. In this particular instance, given the hierarchy of this particular street, the local area traffic management policy provisions don't apply. So that's what that comment refers to.
Councillor Wright.
Thank you, Mayor. The report acknowledges that vehicles parked in the middle of the road are contrary to the local law. Given that Regulation 160 of the Road Traffic Code 2000 prohibits stopping a vehicle near an obstruction in a way that further obstructs traffic, could administration elaborate on how the observed parking practices on the road might contribute to traffic obstructions and safety concerns?
Mr Singh.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. If the residents feel that the vehicles are parking in contravention to the Road Traffic Act or the local law, they can actually contact city's rangers or also the WA police if vehicle is parked and not in a safe manner. What we've done is we looked at internally for the last 3-4 years or 5 years, how many times our rangers been out, and we looked at a couple of times they've been given infringements, 3 times over the last 5 years, and the other times when it was reported, but when the inspection was done, they moved on, so they couldn't be verified.
Councillor Wright.
Thank you. I've got 2 more. The report states that parking prohibitions are generally only provided in frequent high congestion areas. Could the city clarify whether the obstruction of driveways as described in the petition could be considered a circumstance warranting a parking prohibition, even if it is not in a high congestion area?
Mr Singh.
Thank you, Mayor. Not in this particular instance. That's the reason this comment has been made in the report. The traffic congestion would be there is a continuous traffic or the traffic volumes are high. They're causing traffic safety issues for the vehicles and people walking in that area. So that didn't apply in this particular case.
Thank you, Mr Singh. Councillor Wright.
Thank you, Mayor. Just for my last question, the report mentions that the enforcement of parking prohibitions will impact the resource availability of the city's parking compliance officers. Could the council be provided with information on current enforcement capacity and how it might be affected by increased parking prohibitions for this case and for future ones?
Mr Singh.
Thank you, Mayor. I'll probably take that on notice and provide further information through the notes.
Thank you. Are there any other questions on this item? Councillor Miles.
Thank you, Mayor. Just to go back to Councillor Singh was one of his answers. You suggested or you said that Ranger Services had been policing that street. There's nothing in the report to indicate that. Can you give us an update on what they've done or what they haven't done?
Mr Singh.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. The information I received through our Ranger Services is that There were 3 infringements were issued, 1 in 2019 and 2 in 2021. And that was with the stopping on the path or median, in this particular case, obstructing the footpath. And we had a few CRMs come in this year, in June, where a vehicle was parked at the end of the road, obviously obstructing the driveway. And the driver was spoken to by the rangers and asked to move on. And there was another one done back in April. Similarly, vehicle parked at the end of the road. It was reported overnight, and when the rangers attended next day, the vehicle had left. And prior to that one, in 2023, we had 4 complaints for that particular instance, none in 2022 and 6 in 2021, mostly relating to the parking on the footpath.
Thank you. Any other questions on this item, councillors? I'll go to Councillor Miles first for the second question.
Yes,
and then to
sorry,
Councillor Rowe.
Deputy Mayor. Just to follow up on that, Councillor Singh, can you maybe for next week get us some information? I'd like to understand maybe clearly Ranger Services, it's been identified as an issue over the last few years and especially the last few months, whether they've been doing some sort of drive-through there more regularly in light of the fact that we've had a petition of 44 people. That should trigger some extra level of service by them through that area. Can we see what they have maybe achieved?
Thank you. Deputy Mayor Rowe.
Thank you, Mayor. I will foreshadow an impartiality interest on this for next week. My question is, this is a relatively quick turnaround in terms of petition being tabled last month and the report being ready only 3 to 4 weeks later. I think that's the first I've seen with that quick turnaround. Given that the city's not supporting at this stage the installation of parking prohibitions, what is the city's recommended approach for residents who are clearly experiencing significant frustration on this issue? Is it simply just call the rangers and wait for them to attend the site? Is that the advice?
Mr. Singh.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. As part of the driving licence conditions, we are meant to all who have driver licence to drive and park in accordance with driving licence condition, which is to park safely in a street if it is safe to do so. So it could be residents can contact the city's rangers and also WA police if they feel there is a traffic safety issue. But rangers can be contacted as the first port of call.
Thank you. Any other questions on this item, councillors? Councillor Figg.
I note the block of land that is at the end of the street. I'm assuming that's going to remain in situ for some time and won't be developed. Is that the case?
Mr. Singh.
Thank you, Mayor. It's a private property, obviously subject to development at some stage in future. We don't know the timelines when that will be developed.
Any other questions? If there are no other questions, we'll go back to the agenda proper. And next week is when council will vote on the item. So we'll now go to item 4.2, approval services, review of local planning policy 2.5, telecommunications infrastructure. Go ahead.
Good evening, Mayor and elected members. There are 3 reports on the agenda from the Planning and Sustainability Directorate on tonight's meeting. Mr. Bowring and I are not proposing to introduce any of the 3 reports, but we would be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Dixon. Do I have any questions on item 4.2? The local planning policy 2.5 telecommunications infrastructure, councillors. Deputy Mayor Rowe.
Thank you, Mayor, and through yourself. Does the policy cover the advertising and the consultation requirements? Just because we've had a couple of planning matters where residents will participate in the consultation, but any objections or comments that they make are not based on valid planning considerations. So does the policy or our engagement mechanism actually explain clearly to residents what is a valid planning consideration, just so when they're engaging, they're doing so knowing what sort of comments they're allowed to make that are going to have due regard?
Thank you. Mr. Bowring.
Thank you, through you, Madam Mayor. The policy itself doesn't and doesn't need to. We have other processes and procedures. We have a consultation procedure which outlines those matters for people making a submission, which is linked through our consultation have a say page, so that when people are preparing a submission on any proposal, whether it's telecommunications or otherwise, that they're given that information about what constitutes a planning matter.
Thank you. Any other questions on this item, councillors? Councillor Wright.
Thank you, Mayor. Just on page 57, there was outlines the recommended methods for advertising. Is it possible to add a Facebook post onto that? Because I know there is some interest from community groups in regards to this policy. We've quite frequently have a lot of petitions and residents come around telephone towers. So I just think it might be worth it sharing it on Facebook so people are aware that this policy is under review.
Mr Bowring.
Certainly, we can link things. I mean, perhaps there might be some more commentary from our manager of communications. But from a land use planning point of view, we need to follow the standard advertising format. We can't receive and deal with comments received through social media, but we can certainly provide that information if that's what we wanted to do, but that would be a special case for telecommunications.
Councillor Wright.
I suppose just to clarify my question, not so much the comments, but just putting in a link to the You'll Say page on the Facebook website, not taking submissions off Facebook.
Mr Bowring.
Yes, certainly if that's what council wanted to do with phone towers in particular or any other consultation process.
Thank you. Any other questions on this item? If there are no further questions on this item, councillors, do we have any questions on item 4.3? Consideration of Amendment 215 to District Planning Scheme Number 2, rezoning of various lots in the Woodvale locality from rural to urban development. Any questions on this item? Councillor Miles.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. Just one of my first questions I had, and I think I mentioned this maybe once before, obviously the city's got the historic Cockman House near this site, and I know because I'm on the city's heritage working group, there is concerns about the house already with some of the walls not necessarily in good order, and I think they're going to have to do some major maintenance. With all this work going on literally very close by, is there any conditions that may be put on at this stage to be aware of the fact we've got the historic site and is not built to today's standards, and maybe with some rumbling and stuff like that, it could damage the facility, the site further?
Mr Bowring.
Thank you. The process for construction, there'd be two stages. First would be preliminary earthworks and retaining, which would likely deal with any compaction and the like. So during those processes, the developers and the engineers are required to conduct dilapidation surveys and engage with landowners in the area as to potential impacts and then address their techniques. So yes, that would be something that we would be able to be involved in as a landowner of a heritage site. I'd expect that we would be consulted at that stage.
Yeah, I understand there would be part of that, and I understand that, but part of this proposal is obviously to have some commercial, it's going to be partly zoned commercial, a good part of it. I'm just concerned of what might go in there that could add to the disturbance or the vibration in and around close by to the building.
Thank you, Councillor Miles. Mr Bowring, would you like to respond to that? Mr Dixon.
Thank you. Excuse me, through you, Mayor. So at this stage in the planning process, this is a very high-level stage where it's a consideration to change the zoning in our scheme. There are many subsequent planning stages that need to be followed post the initiation of this proposal to amend our scheme. We've got to go through a structure plan. If it's initiated and the MRS is supported, then there'll be a need for development applications. It's at those subsequent detailed planning stages that consideration of those matters will be addressed. In looking at the proposal, whilst Cockman House lies adjacent and the setting of it lies adjacent to the area that's proposed. This is very much an early stage in the planning process, and it will be at the subsequent stages that those issues will be addressed.
Thank you, Mr Dixon. Are there any other questions? Councillor Miles.
Yeah, totally understand what you're saying and what you're putting forward to council. But however, once we've accepted the proposal and it's advertised and it goes up for approval, we can't unravel what we've done. And whilst we could possibly, and that's my concern, that if we can't put some sort of note or condition or something in at this stage, doesn't matter what happens, I'm not saying don't develop it, I'm saying we need to be very cautious that it doesn't impact on what is, I understand, the first building that was ever listed by the City of Wanneroo.
Mr Dixon.
Yeah. Through you, Mayor, at the subsequent stages through the local structure plan, if there's a requirement for a broader setting for the heritage building, that would be considered at that stage in the planning process and the subsequent development application stages. That's not an issue that's typically, it's a too detailed an issue to be addressed at the scheme amendment stage, but it certainly would need to be considered in the subsequent planning stages.
Thank you. Mr Bowring, would you like to make a comment?
Just further to Mr Dixon's comments, thanks. The site's a heritage site, so that any development, and at each stage we need to look at the implications for adjoining heritage properties. So this will keep coming up. It's not a, this amendment goes through and we don't worry about it in the future. It will come up in each subsequent stage. In fact, we are engaged with the Commission as part of looking at this as to what they're doing with the property which lies between Cockman House and the subject site. And at this stage, the Commission hasn't got any plans for that site. Our thought was that that land would be included in potentially in a normalisation or a rezoning from rural to another zone. But at this stage, the Commission hasn't got any plans for that. So you've still got that buffer to the site, which provides that more extensive space for the heritage building. But because of that heritage, the proximity of the heritage site at that structure planning stage, at the development stage, we would still be expected to take those considerations into account.
Thank you, Mr Bowring. Do you have an... Oh, Councillor Herridge has a question. Councillor Herridge, would you like to ask a question, please?
Thanks, Mayor. Sorry, Councillor. No. I also share similar concerns, both with the Heritage House but also Yellowgonga that's next door as well. City of Joondalup obviously have something similar happening in their patch on the other side in regards to residential, but this is commercial. So I was just wondering if, for everybody, you could explain for us the complex amendment that you've got listed here on page 85 and what that actually means, and confirm what commercial this is possibly that's going on there.
Mr Bowring.
Thank you. Yeah, the classification of complex amendment is simply to classify the process of the amendment as to whether or not the extent of consultation required. So complex means that there's a material change to the land use that would be apparent, whereas a basic might be just some text changes to fix up an error, some minor changes to the scheme text or the map. Whereas this is a substantive change, so it goes through a more complex assessment process. So that's really just the classification. What the applicant has provided to demonstrate their future intent is to show a commercial style development on the site. Now that is a couple of steps beyond where we're at the moment. So at this stage there's a Metropolitan Region Scheme amendment initiated to rezone the land from rural in the Metropolitan Region Scheme to urban, and that then requires an amendment to District Planning Scheme number 2 to an appropriate zone, in this case urban development. And so what urban development zone would then enable is the lodgement of a structure plan, and that structure plan would then deal with what are the appropriate zones and uses, whether it is commercial, whether it's residential or some other range of land zones and land uses. So that's where we'll get into the detail of what type of development, how many of this or how many of that. All those questions will be dealt with at that point.
Thank you, Mr Barron. Councillor Herridge.
Thanks, Mayor. Just to clarify then, so basically what you're telling us is to get to any further process, both of these have to be done at this stage.
Mr Barron.
Thank you. Yes, that's correct.
Any other questions on this item? Councillor Miles.
Yeah, thank you. Just on the map, I was a little confused by the map that's attached to this report. On page, I'll get to the page 92, and it's got, I'm assuming it's a red box which goes from Ocean Reef Drive, and then it's got sort of a folded line, and then it says on this map, other regional roads, reservation and rural zone to primary roads. Is there still, does this property still have access to Ocean Reef Road? Is that what that's indicating?
Mr Barron.
Thank you. That's actually an extract of the Metropolitan Region Scheme Amendment that the Commission is dealing with. So that's actually to tidy up yet the actual some of the differences between the actual boundary of the Ocean Reef Road flyover and intersection, and to make sure that the regional road reserve is actually matching up with the as constructed and final boundaries of the road. That's my understanding. As it pertains to this site, which is lot 900, 803, 26 and Woodvale Drive, that's the area that we're looking at as part of Amendment 215 to the District's Planning Scheme number 2. So,
Thank you, Mr Barron. Do you have another question, Councillor Miles?
Yeah, I do. Just in the report, it indicates, and this goes to a little bit of, and I have heard whispers on what might go on this site, but in the report it actually indicates the traffic impact assessment that the road, which is Woodvale Drive, can take anything up to 7,500 vehicles a day. So it's not necessarily a neighbourhood centre that they might want to build. It could be something bigger in retail.
Mr Barron.
yeah, so that would come through a net benefit test. If there was to be any commercial use, whether it's a local centre, which is a bit smaller, neighbourhood centre is a bit more complex, might have a wider range of commercial uses on there. Whatever commercial use or commercial activity can be sustained would have to be demonstrated through a net benefit test. The Planning Commission would have to agree that an out-of-centre development could be approved. We've had similar discussions in the recent past about out-of-centre developments being proposed along Wanneroo Road as well.
Thank you, Mr Barron. Any other questions on this item? No other questions? Okay, so we now go to item 4.4, preparation of amendment 222 to District Planning Scheme number 2, normalisation of land in the Jindalee North Agreed Local Structure Plan number 88 area. Do we have any questions to this item, councillors? If there are no questions to this item, we now progress to Assets and Infrastructure Capital Works, item 4.6. Mr Singh. Thank you, Mr Dixon. Mr Singh, are there any items that you wish to speak to?
No, Mayor, thank you. We're happy to take any questions on item 4.6 and 4.7.
Councillors, do I have any questions for item 4.6, which is the tender for the Kingsway Regional Sporting Complex renewal of the netball court surface and flood lighting for the West Courts? Any questions on that item? Yes, Councillor Herridge.
Thanks, Mayor. Just one from me. When would be the construction ETA be?
Mr Singh?
Thank you, Mayor. We're looking at starting as soon as tenders are awarded in the off-season for netball, getting the work done, and that was a requirement for all the tenders to meet.
Thank you. Any other questions on that item? There are no other questions on that item. Parks and Conservation Management, item 4.7, response to petition PTO 1524 requesting that Council rescinds its decision made at the ordinary Council meeting on the 23rd of April 24 to remove an Agoriforma fora costata tree in the street verge of 8 Cordelia Place, Alexander Heights. Councillors, do I have any questions on this item? Deputy Mayor Rowe.
I just have one, Mayor, given that a lot of the subject when this matter was discussed was around driveway repairs, noting that it's there's nothing in the city's policy that talks about that mechanism to be able to offer that support to residents who are impacted by verge trees. Is the city able to, or has the city already updated its web pages just to make residents aware who are experiencing tree issues that the city can provide that support if the tree has become a considerable, having a considerable impact upon their property?
Mr Chettleberg.
Through you, Mayor. Administration has taken that on board and is in the process of looking how we best provide that information through our website. Also taking on some previous feedback from Council in regards to what services are available to people in our community that need assistance in clearing leaf litter from their private property, and that information will be incorporated onto our website in the next few months.
Thank you, Mr Chettleberg. Any other questions on this item? If there are no other questions on this item, we now go to Community in Place, Community Facilities. Thank you, Mr Singh and Mr Chettleberg. Good evening and welcome. Are there any items you'd like to speak to, Ms Davids?
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you to you and your council for the welcome to the city. Tonight, Community in Place has 3 items, of which I'd like to invite the Manager of Community Facilities to talk to item 4.9.
Mr Clem.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. So item 4.9 is a report requesting Council accept 2 government funding amounts, $500,000 from the state government and $300,000 from the federal government to contribute to the a project for the construction of additional change room facilities at the Wanneroo Showgrounds. So we're seeking Council's support to, or seeking Council's approval to accept those funding amounts, and then administration can progress this project through the Capital Works program.
Thank you, Mr Clem. Are there any questions? Councillor Wright.
Thank you, Mayor. I've got 3 questions on this item. Just my first one, the report mentions delays in progressing the project. Could administration clarify who is actually in control of the project at this current time?
Mr Clem.
Thank you, Mayor. So both funding amounts that were provided actually to the clubs. So the funding commitments were to the clubs, not to the city. So administration, obviously, as the building is the city's asset, administration had worked with the club on some concept designs. But along that journey, of course, the funding amounts were going to the club. In the discussion around those concept designs and the funding, it was decided that if the city could accept the funding amounts on behalf of the club, then it could progress the project. So there was some delays in the finalisation of the concept design, in capturing, I guess, what the club wanted within the scope. And then because of the offset in time between the 2 funding amounts, there was some initial concerns around the amount of money that was committed and whether it was sufficient to cover the project. The subsequent supporting funding from the federal government helped to close that gap. And so now we're in a position for both funding amounts to be taken on by the city and for the city to manage that project.
Thank you, Mr Clem. Councillor Wright.
Thank you, Mayor. My second question was in regards to that given grant funding, which doesn't cover internal costs. Has the city budgeted for these additional expenses already? And if so, how much has been allocated?
Mr Clem.
Thank you, Mayor. No, the City hasn't included this in its capital work program at this stage. Subject to Council's endorsement of accepting the funding, then the City would determine the appropriate project costs through the design process, and we would seek Council's endorsement to amendment to the budget to have those additional funds. Typically, project costs that we allow for around about, project management costs are around 10% of the total project cost.
Thank you. Councillor Wright, you have another question?
Yeah, just my last question. The report mentions potential risks that could increase the project costs. What contingency plans are in place to address these risks if they materialise?
Mr Clem.
Thank you, Mayor. So the report mentions that the design process would be conducted on the basis that the budget is $800,000. So we would be working to come up with a design that fits within that budget amount. So that would be the strategy to I guess, mitigate any cost overruns on this project.
Thank you. I have a question to ask. It's more of a point of clarification, Mr Clem. I just want to clarify, the funding was allocated to the Wanneroo Football Club and for the Wanneroo Football Club to manage these projects, and they were allocated in the 2021 and 2022 election campaigns, and we have now taken over the project management and we are only now receiving it in July 24, and I would like you to confirm that we are only beginning the project management in July 2024 because we haven't had access to those funds because they were previously given to the Wanneroo Football Club to manage. Is that correct, Mr Clem?
Thank you, Mayor. Yes, that's correct. Accepting this funding would formalise it from the City's perspective as a project that we need now take over and deliver.
Thank you. So it's been, I just confirm, it's been 3 years since the state election project funding and 2 years since the federal election funding that it's been sitting there, and we only just begin to have access to that now. Is that correct?
Yes, Mayor, that's correct.
Thank you. Any other questions? Councillor Moore, thank you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Mr Clem, once we accept this federal and state funding, do we have an ETA as to when we can actually start the work for this project, or when this might be completed?
Mr Clem.
Thank you, Mayor, thanks for the question. We would be able to, subject to, through I guess a council accepting a resolution to add additional money into the City's budget in this current financial year 24-25, we would be able to commence the design process, the detailed design process this year. The federal funding grant has an indicative delivery time frame of December 2026, so we would be endeavouring to achieve that time frame.
Thank you, Mr Clem. Any other questions? Councillor Seif, sorry, Councillor Miles, I saw.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Can I just, sorry, I'm a bit short, I'm a bit far away from the microphone. Can I just clarify that we've already been given, have we already been given the state funding, but it wasn't enough to complete the projects, and now we've sought federal funding, and that we can't take in the project management until we get the federal funding? Is that correct?
Mr Clem.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Councillor, for the question. No, in this case, neither funding amount has been accepted by the City at this stage. We've been aware of the state funding amount since the state election and have been working with the club on a design, but the actual funding hasn't been accepted by the City.
Councillor Seif.
Thank you, Mayor. Just a follow-up question. So, was there any consultation between the state member and the City when the original funding grant was given to the football club? Was there any consultation with the City, or was it just between the state member and the football club?
Mr Clem.
My understanding, Councillor, is that the communication was between the state member and the club, and the City wasn't involved in those discussions.
Thank you. Any other questions? Oh, any other questions on this item? Councillor Miles.
Yeah, thank you. With this particular, and obviously we're sort of in a position that we will obviously be taking the state and federal funding. When when I'm assuming the club has asked us to take the project over, is that right?
Mr Clem?
Yes, that's correct.
When they asked the
Miles?
city to take over the project, did they hand over any design at all that they were working on over the last couple of years?
Mr Clem?
Yes, there is a high-level concept design that we have been working with the club on, and that is the basis for us that we will now move forward.
Thank you, Mr Clem. Any other questions? Deputy Mayor Rowe.
Yeah, Mayor, I understand, and it's actually been quite well explained by Mr Clem. I'm trying to still understand the delay of several years. Is this one of those projects that subsequent to a federal or a state election, the club had to reapply to acquit the funds? Because I know there was a certain process, particularly after the last federal election, where clubs and groups that were the recipients of funds had to reapply based on a reassessment of the entire budget process. Was this one of those examples?
Mr Clem?
Thank you, Mayor. Yes, that's correct. So the federal election funding commitments from 2022 then had to go through an application process to formalise those individual bits of funding. That application process took up most of 2023, so it was only sort of towards around September last year, I believe, that the club submitted their application for that funding. And then through an assessment process, further information was required to be provided by the club. That took it into early 2024, and then in recent times, we've had those discussions around the city potentially taking over the grant.
Thank you, Mr Clem. Deputy Mayor Rowe.
Just one more question, Mayor. So assuming if it is $300,000 in federal funding, $500,000 in state funding, adding up to 800K, the logic that you were suggesting, Mr Clem, was that a roughly 10% project management fee equating to about $80,000, that's money that the city does not have budgeted at this stage. So it would be classified, Mayor, as unallocated funds that would have to be diverted towards this project. And if that is the case, can the city speculate as to what impact it might have on the delivery of other projects?
Mr Clem?
To answer the first part of the question, yes, that's correct about that $80,000. I might direct the second part to Director Singh if he wants to comment on the impact of the program.
Mr Singh?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. As the project timeline outlines in the report, the additional funding will be required in 25-26 if Council accepts that funding. So as part of forthcoming LTFP review, long-term financial plan review, that need to be looked at what impact this will make on other projects.
Thank you, Mr Singh. Councillor Wright, you have a question?
Thank you, Mayor. Sorry, I just had two additional questions and just following off from Deputy Mayor Rowe. So for the showgrounds now, we have three projects all running at the same time. We've got the canopy and the dugouts, the cricket nets and the clubroom extension, all on separate grant funding, all on separate timelines. I think two of them have been accepted by us now, and the internal cost for all of those were excluded. So what's the total sum of all three projects now, and how much has the city taken on board diverting resources away?
Mr Clem, sorry.
Thank you, Mayor. In terms of the total amount, I'd need to take that on notice and get a response back to you. But you are correct. This change room extension project is one of several projects that's happening down at the Wanneroo Showgrounds. Some with state government funding, some with federal government funding, but we can get some clarity around those projects and provide that for next week.
Thank you, Mr Clem. Councillor Wright?
And just one more, you've mentioned to Councillor Miles around the preliminary concept plan. Is that possible to be circulated to us prior to next week's meeting, just so we can have a look at those designs?
Mr Clem?
Yes, I think that should be okay. I just need to check on the property of that plan, but yes, we can circulate that around.
Thank you. Any other questions on this item? Councillor Miles?
Just finally, if also, Mr Clem, obviously some of these projects have just appeared, is there been a master plan or something that some of these promises have been sort of, oh, I'll fund that or I'll fund that. So is there something that the community can see or we can see as a council, like as a master plan of what's still required for the showgrounds, or is this something that's just been thought of between the club and the local members?
Mr Clem?
Thanks, Mayor. Yes, the discussions has been mostly between the club and the local member. In terms of the projects, we can provide a summary of what they are for the showgrounds. Certainly for next week's council meeting, to give an idea of the different projects that have had state and federal government funding from the recent elections.
Councillor Miles.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. And just finally, Mr. Clem, I guess what I'm concerned about is there's a lot of ad hoc adding on to buildings and what the like. So my concern is, have we not got fit for purpose facilities, and we're not keeping up with that, and that's why I wanted to know whether there was some sort of facility master plan for the showgrounds to make sure that we are keeping up to date with whatever the requirements of our community sports require.
Mr. Clem.
Thank you, Mayor. I think in the case for most of these projects, they are, I guess, club wish list kind of items, which aren't necessary, I guess, for the overall management for the overall operation of a club. In the case of the club room extension building, this is specifically to help support the growth of female participation in AFL, and it provides this particular facility with additional change room space, so that when you've got those different genders playing on the same day, then you've got different allocated change room areas. So that is I think that's something that all local governments are grappling with, and in terms of planning for that for the future of what is a fantastic outcome, the growth of female participation in those kinds of sports, and then providing the facilities to support that.
Thank you, Mr. Clem. Any other questions, councillors? If there are no more questions on this item, I go to item 4.8, which is the Wanneroo Recreation Centre Upgrade Project Working Group Terms of Reference. Councillor Wright has foreshadowed an alternative to this terms of reference. Are there any questions on this item, councillors? Councillor Wright.
I suppose just from me, just in regards to administration's view, in regards to these project working groups, is it supported that multiple working groups are needed for multiple strategic projects, or is it of the view to have one group or a strategic approach to those sorts of things?
Mr. Parker.
Thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to give Mr. Clem a break. I thought he'd answered relatively well tonight, so I thought I'd jump in. I think, Councillor Wright, as I mentioned to you, when we were preparing the report, and Mr. Clem and I had a number of conversations, our preferred methodology was actually to have a single working group or fewer working groups looking over a broad range of projects, because it is quite intensive from an admin perspective to, I guess, to support all of those groups. But we really grappled with the council resolution and working to that resolution. So I think once we have a good look at your alternate, I think you'll find that the administrative committee is actually supportive of what's been proposed.
Thank you. Any other questions on this item? Councillor Miles.
Yeah, just I was talking to Councillor Smith with regard to the meeting procedures in the T's and C's of the report, Mr. Clem, and under section 4. I'm just wondering why under A you would have that the working group shall meet on a quarterly basis, and then with dates of these meetings determined by the working group. As this afternoon we were in the Alkimos Aquatic Centre working group, and that's met a lot sooner than every quarter. So I'm wondering whether that should be changed to as and needed until the project's obviously at a stage where the working group is no longer required, and then maybe you could look at a mechanism of which, when the working groups actually, as we discussed this afternoon, end. When do we say the working group's no longer required? So if you could maybe have a look at that and I'm happy to do an amendment and make it up myself, but I'd rather you do that.
Mr. Clem.
Thank you, Mayor. Yes, we can look at some changes to the TORs that might reflect that for next week.
Thank you. Are there any other questions on this item? If there are no further questions on this item, I would like to go to item 4.10, which is the review of the community engagement policy. Do I have any questions on that? Deputy Mayor Rowe.
I have two questions, Mayor, and I think these were outlined at a previous discussion we had on this as well. A recurring theme is how we engage with the different demographics that we have in our community, and the two groups that I often bring up is our seniors who may not be able to participate in the Your Say page or some other form of online consultation, and then the second group being our culturally and linguistically diverse community, because we often showcase the percentage of people that were born overseas, but I feel like we need to be able to incorporate those groups more in the way that we actually engage with them on key projects and key consultations. So does this policy or anything else the city's working on factor in how we're engaging with our seniors and our people from cold backgrounds?
Hello, Ms Davis.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor. I'd like to invite the Manager of Place to respond.
Ms Finno.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Councillor, for that question. Yes, we do acknowledge that there are some certain user groups out there that do require that additional level of consultation. So as part of this review, and I think in the report, we actually do a high-level outline of the process, and dot point 3 refers to engaging with specific groups relevant to the project, be it sporting, Aboriginal, Torres Strait Islander, youth, seniors, cold, and people with disability. And as part of the implementation procedure, we do have a kind of additional tools and methodologies to approach those groups. Not included in this report is a side piece of work that we're doing. It's an external community engagement framework, and that's to explain to the community, councillors, etc., the process that the city undertakes, when we consult, how we consult, who we consult, and that kind of thing. So we anticipate that to go out to community consultation about September, October.
Thank you, Ms Finno. Do you have another question?
Just one, thanks, Mayor. The question is, do we have a trigger or a mechanism in place for when we expand the consultation? Now, that might be the radius, the scope, or the length of the consultation period, because we have had a couple of instances in the last several years when a consultation occurs and it might be at a particular time of the year that's inconvenient for people to complete, so it might have benefited from a longer consultation timeframe. Or in terms of the radius, that 400 metre or catchment can be quite restrictive in terms of the people that may have an interest in the matter but not live within the immediate local area. So is there a trigger or some discretion in this policy that allows the administration to consult more widely with our community?
Ms Finno.
Thank you, Mayor. Short answer is yes. So as part of the initial pre-planning stages, we've developed a community engagement plan, and that is kind of an assessment matrix. So you determine, depending on the project, who's involved, which community groups are involved, if the site in question is a local, district, neighbourhood, the type of function it serves. In terms of the timing, we generally have extended periods over your Christmas, January closures, but typically, depending on the level of consult, it can be between 2 to 4 weeks, and all that detail is worked out at the beginning of the consultation, which is signed off at the beginning. And when the consult's underway, if we're not getting enough engagement that we tend to like, we're trying to, I guess we call it bump it, so that's pushing out in more social comms and that kind of thing, and hopefully get more responses then.
Thank you, Ms Fennell. Councillor Wright, you have a question?
Thank you, Mayor. It's just on page 190 under the roles and responsibilities, and I found the first paragraph a little bit interesting. It says, projects that set a direction or define a position for the city or have a significant operational or financial implication will be considered by council prior to commencing community engagement. Could you explain in terms of that? I guess for our position, usually when it comes to policies and stuff, usually we like to see the community feedback before we vote on something. Would you be able to explain why that is in that new policy?
Ms Fennell.
Thank you, Mayor. Yes, I guess the intention of this new section is based on our learnings from, for example, the Queen's Caravan Park consultation. That was a significant engagement process that ideally we would have liked to go on to council on the onset before we started that process. And maybe if that's not coming across in that paragraph, we can find it a bit better, but that's the intention of that sentence.
Thank you. Any other questions on this item? Councillor Miles?
Yeah, because this is a report to obviously do consultation, bearing in mind what's been said by the Deputy Mayor and other councillors, how are you going to do the consultation to do with this item?
Ms Fennell.
Thank you, Councillor. That's a very good question. I kind of alluded to it earlier, how we were having the external community engagement framework process, and as part of that consultation, we refer to the policy. So we're hoping to wrap it all up as part of that process.
Thank you, Ms Finor. Any other questions? If there are no more questions, that finishes community in place. Thank you. We now go to corporate strategy and performance. We're not there yet. Ms Jennings, do you have any items you wish to speak to?
Thank you, Mayor. There's 4 items here this evening. We do have one small comment to make about the item on the men's shed, 4.14.
Thank you. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor. Just introducing the proposed agreement for lease and ground lease for the Northern Suburbs men's shed. We just wanted to acknowledge the great work and positive progress that administration has made with the men's shed group, particularly in recent months, with the current leadership of the group putting a lot of effort to get to the current stage. This has been marked by a lease document that is now agreed in principle, and the men's shed has indicated they're satisfied to sign. It's been approved by the Department of Planning, Lands and Heritage, so any need for further DPLH input on the land tenure has been addressed. And finally, and probably most significantly, the development application has been approved. So the uncertainty as to what was being built and what the implications of that are, that's now been addressed. So referring back to when Council considered this about 2.5 years ago, there was uncertainty as to some of those aspects. In an approach very similar to what was taken with the Wildflower Society, those uncertainties have been resolved, and hopefully it's a much clearer proposal for Council to consider.
Thank you, Mr Greer. Are there any questions on this item? Deputy Mayor Rowe.
I will foreshadow an interest, Mayor, but the one question I have, and I know Mr Greer has covered it, but I remember the nature of the discussion in the chamber 2.5 years ago. On the connection of services costs, we have reached an agreed position between the city and the shed. Is that correct?
Mr Greer.
Thank you, Mayor. Yes, that is correct. It's outlined in the report and is also confirmed in the lease documents that have been agreed by the parties.
Thank you, Mr Greer. Any other questions on this item? If there are no other questions on this item, I go to item 411, the financial activity statement for the period ended the 31st of May. Are there any questions on this item? Actually, I have a question. If we can go to page 212, I see that we're looking at about, at the moment, $77.1 million worth of capital works. But at the moment we've completed $54.4 million, which is about $26.7 million short. That's about 30% of the capital works not completed. We have the forecast that will be about, I think, according to the graph, will be about $10 million short or $13 million short, which is roughly 15% of capital works. Is that forecast correct, that we will be that short by the 30th of June when we do the financial statement for the end of year? Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. I do have an estimate for our carry forward, which is about $7 million, and some of the rest of the money will be savings, but I will pass over to the Director of Assets with more about the total. Thanks.
Mr Singh.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. The actual expenditure forecast for the whole financial year is coming around $66 million. So 66 million plus, I think, the carry forward of about 7. That will be the total committed and spent budget.
Okay, so we'll be about $11 million short at the end of the year, according to what was budgeted at $77.1 million. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct. But of that, 4 million is savings going back to the reserves, and the 7 million is carried forward. Majority of that is committed through the long-term projects.
Okay, so we've got 10% roughly of our budget, of our capital works budget being carried forward. Thank you. I just wanted to clarify that. Are there any other questions on this item? If anyone else has a question on it? If no one else has a question on 411, I would like to go to 412, warrant of payments. Does anyone have any questions? Yes, Councillor Wright.
I just had one, and it was a point that Councillor Herridge made 2 council meetings ago. Councillors are still not being properly worded in the warrant of payments. Seems to be from our new councillors from 2023. They're still spread out everywhere. That needs to be changed.
Thank you. So you want councillor in front so they all come out at the same, in the same place in the alphabetical order of the warrant of payments. Is that correct?
Yeah, I don't know whether the titles are not being used in the finance system properly or not, so I just thought I'd raise it as Councillor Herridge did last time.
Thank you. Are there any other questions on the warrant of payments, councillors? If there are no other questions on the warrant of payments, we now go to item 413, the customer experience policy. Do we have any questions on the customer experience policy, councillors? Councillor Herridge.
Thank you, Mayor. Just one clarification for me. Page 330, we did have a discussion about this. There was a line that I thought we were removing from the policy under complainant. It says cannot let go of their complaint. We did have quite a robust discussion.
Ms Jennings.
Yes, through the chair, that's correct. We were going to take that away, sorry.
Thank you. Any other questions on this item? If there are no other questions on this item, we now go to governance and legal. Mr CEO.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you for your comments, Deputy Mayor. One that I know you're very excited about, review of the legal representation and cost indemnification policy. I have Kelly Davis here, who is our Acting Manager of Governance and Legal, who's been heavily involved in preparing this updated policy, and I've also had a bit of experience applying this policy over time. So happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you. Any questions on this item? Okay, there are no questions on this item. We now go to item 5. Motions on notice. I foreshadow a motion next week. A motion on notice. Item 6, late reports to be circulated under a separate cover. Sorry? Oh, yes, Councillor Herridge.
Sorry, Mayor. I did just have a clarification on the numbers listed, page 422. I think we've confused ourselves. There should be a 7 where there's a 6 under an application that's being removed. 626 and 628 should say 726 and 728.
Yes, Ms Kelly.
Thank you, Councillor Herridge. We'll ensure that's corrected for next week.
Thank you.
Okay, so we've done motions on notice. Late reports to be circulated. There are none. Oh, yes, Ms Jennings.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. There is going to be a report for the deputy delegate for the Catalina Regional Council, and hopefully there'll also be a budget item as well.
Thank you, Ms Jennings. Any late reports that I haven't been told about on my agenda? Okay, thank you. Item 7, public question time. Is there anyone in the gallery that wants to ask a question at public question time? There are no questions at public question time. Confidential, there is none. Item 9, the date of the next meeting. The next ordinary council meeting has been scheduled for 6 p.m. on Tuesday the 16th of July 2024 to be held at Council Chambers, Civic Centre, 23 Dundebar Road, Wanneroo. Item 10, closure. I declare the meeting closed at about 8 minutes past 7 this evening. Thank you, councillors, and thank you for your time.